while the guy behind her keeps yelling, blaming her for dragging them all into this mess. She's too frustrated to figure out a plan. She snaps, telling him to shut up before, in a fit of rage, she drives her clawed hand right through his stomach, leaving him doubled over, blood pouring from his mouth as he collapses to the ground. With him silenced, she turns her focus back to the problem at hand, her mind racing, struggling to understand how Gangu could shrug off so many suppression devices. If he were truly this powerful, he'd kept it well hidden until now. Her gaze lands on a wounded soldier nearby, who, sensing his end, begins to cry, pleading for anyone to save him. Almost as if on cue, his wish is granted. Gangu steps forward and, with one swift move, severs the woman's clawed hand, rescuing the soldier from her grasp. Without hesitation, he turns to her, giving her a chance for any last words. At that moment, realization dawns on her. She knows she's finished. But instead of fear, with a wicked smirk, she mentions Tomai, the very hero who captured her and put her in this prison. Reflecting on her past, she confesses she once told Tomai not to become a hero, advice her younger sister foolishly ignored. Wait, Tomai is her biological sister? This revelation catches Gangu off guard, and it's a twist as surprising to him as it is to us. But she's not finished. She mocks Gangu, remarking on the irony of a supposed hero taking so many lives, violating the hero code against killing. Gangu's patience wears thin, and he finally cuts her off, asking if she has anything meaningful to add, as if ready to silence her chatter once and for all. But before we close the chapter on her story, let's take a look at her backstory. When Tomoki first joined the hero organization, something felt off. She observed how heroes could act with impunity, even if innocent civilians were caught in the crossfire. There was no accountability, no consequences. One incident in particular stayed with her: a hero who took down a criminal but also ended the life of an innocent bystander, all without a hint of remorse. With her twisted sense of justice, Tomoki took on the hero name Bliss and joined the league. Her younger sister, Tomai, admired her, seeing her as a protector and a role model. She looked up to Tomoki's strength and heroism, but there was more beneath Tomoki's actions than met the eye. She wasn't saving lives out of compassion. Instead, she reveled in the power it gave her, feeding a sense of superiority. Then one day, Tomoki crossed an irreversible line. She killed her first target, and the rush was intoxicating. From that moment, she spiraled, taking down anyone who opposed her: villains, civilians, even fellow heroes. She thrived on the fear and disbelief in her victims' eyes, feeling unbeatable, a predator in a world of prey. But as her behavior became increasingly unhinged, Tomai couldn't ignore the signs. Tomoki would come home late, covered in blood, her eyes distant. Driven by concern and curiosity, Tomai decided to follow her sister one night, witnessing firsthand the depths of her brutality. Confronted by her younger sister, Tomoki didn't deny her actions. Instead, she invited Tomai to join her, to experience the thrill of the hunt. It was in that horrific moment that Tomai's powers awakened, and her first act as a hero was to try to stop Tomoki's rampage. After registering as a heroine, Tomai dedicated herself to tracking down her now villainous sister. Their tragic saga reached a climax when Tomai finally caught up to Tomoki, arresting the person she once idolized, bringing an end to her sister's brutal reign. Even after her capture, Tomoki showed no remorse. Instead, she sneered at Tomai's summoning powers, mocking her for relying on distance attacks, saying she'd never know the true thrill of crushing someone with her own hands. And so, Tomoki found herself behind bars, harboring nothing but resentment for the sister she once protected. Now, faced with the reality of her own end, Tomoki asks Gangu if her sister died peacefully. Gangu, undeterred, reveals the truth that Tomai died in battle against Huang, obliterated in the struggle. Her last words were desperate, a plea for her older sister to come to her rescue, just like in the old days. Hearing this, a flicker of regret crosses Tomoki's face. But before she can fully process the news, she begins to transform, her body contorting, shifting into something grotesque, neither human nor beast. It's clear she's preparing for one final confrontation with Gangu. In a flash, she lunges at Gangu, but just as she swings, he vanishes, leaving only a trace of crackling dark red energy in the air. Before she can fully register what happened, he reappears behind her, delivering a brutal kick that sends her tumbling backward like a toppled bowling pin. She crashes hard, but as the dust settles, she charges at him again, only to receive another direct hit to the gut, knocking the wind out of her and leaving her coughing up blood. Just like that, she reverts to her human form, collapsing to her knees, weakened and vulnerable. While she groans in pain, Gangu feels a twinge of pity, conflicted about getting his hands dirty with a family member of his fallen companion. The woman, swallowing her pride, begins to beg, pleading for her life and reminding him that, as a hero, he swore never to kill anyone. But Gangu's face remains cold as he calmly tells her he's no hero anymore. Desperate, she clings to his feet, offering anything if only he'll spare her. Her pleas fall on deaf ears, and Gangu reminds her of the innocent lives she's taken. People who once begged for their own lives just like she's doing now. He asks if she even remembers their faces, if she can recall their pleas for mercy before she mercilessly ended them. Realizing there's no escape, she braces herself, watching as he charges his fist for a final blow, preparing to deliver the end she can't avoid. The sounds of their battle reverberate through the prison, sending shockwaves that even the goons outside can hear. Those echoing booms excite the crazed woman waiting in anticipation, convinced it's her future husband causing the ruckus inside. Meanwhile, the officers trapped within the prison shiver in fear, while another prisoner, eagerly listening, grows more anxious to meet Gangu. Barely containing his excitement, he decides it's time to head up to meet him. But before he can move, a powerful blast knocks him backward, sending him crashing to the ground. Stunned, he looks up to see his attacker figure, who's not only unafraid of him but more than ready to give this little villain a run for his money. The attacker, adjusting his hat, compliments the older man on his sinister appearance. The elderly villain responds with a wicked grin, chuckling that he's just an old guy having a bit of fun. This is Kingstone, the infamous prisoner from the 5th basement floor, and Ruculus Prison's #1 inmate. Back in the control room, 2 junior officers catch something unexpected on the monitors. Nervously, they point it out to the warden, alerting her that Kingstone and Huang have crossed paths on basement level 5. Surprisingly, the warden merely shrugs, explaining that this is actually good news. Her calm reaction throws the juniors off, so she clarifies if Kingstone and Huang clash, one of them will be taken out, and she's personally rooting for Kingstone. After all, in her eyes, he's less of a threat compared to Huang. The footage on the monitor grabs her attention further as she notices Kingstone lifting a girl into the air like a puppet, and she can't help but wonder what he's planning. Meanwhile, back in the depths of basement 5, Huang questions the old man, asking if he's really up for a fight. Kingstone, clearly eager for a bit of action, grins and makes it clear he's looking forward to a little match. Huang, however, isn't as keen, muttering that he's not exactly interested in a showdown. But Kingstone isn't one to take no for an answer. His expression grows dark, and with a menacing tone, he says he'd like to have a little fun with Huang, leaving no room for refusal. Before we jump into the battle, let's delve into Kingstone's past. Known as the #1 prisoner of Ruculus, he's been confined to the 5th basement floor for as long as anyone can remember. Unlike the other inmates, many of whom have body counts in the millions, Kingstone's list of victims is surprisingly short. He's only killed 3 people, but each of his targets was monumental. His first victim was Carix, the world's most feared villain of his time. After that, he took down the legendary superhero duo Clark and Hilo, who were widely regarded as the strongest heroes of their generation. Kingstone had emerged from the shadows years ago, effortlessly taking down 3 of the most powerful figures in the world. After finishing them off, he turned to the soldiers who'd witnessed the carnage, casually asking if this made him the strongest person alive, considering he'd just defeated those believed to be invincible. Then, without a hint of resistance, he'd let the government apprehend him. With Kingstone's surrender, the world's biggest threat was supposedly neutralized, but the process of his execution got mired in a web of political maneuvering between the government and the Superhero Association, leaving him on death row for over 30 years. In the present, Kingstone reassures Huang, telling him he's not all that interested in killing young talents, especially those with potential to grow. Huang, reluctant but intrigued, agrees to a little scuffle. In a blink, he levitates the nearby fallen soldiers, morphing their bodies into grotesque spheres of flesh. With a flick, he launches the meaty projectiles at Kingstone, who effortlessly bats each one back, his hands moving at blinding speed. Huang retaliates, hurling them right back, creating a splattered mess on the walls behind them. Blood splatters the walls, and while Huang seems unfazed, Kingstone's face lights up, thoroughly enjoying the exchange. Kingstone initially thinks Huang might be using telekinesis, but the way he counters suggests otherwise. As Kingstone gets into the rhythm, Huang shrugs, clearly unimpressed. He coldly remarks that there's no excitement in fighting Kingstone, hinting that the old man will probably keel over from age before anything exciting happens. Kingstone, visibly irked by Huang's words, suddenly floats closer, his stance growing more menacing. With each step, the ground cracks and crumbles beneath him as he begins dishing out a verbal lashing, mocking Huang's arrogance. And up in the control room, the warden and officers stumble, barely keeping their footing. But the warden, ever composed, scolds her team for overreacting, reminding them that Ruculus Prison was built to withstand attacks from the world's strongest heroes, fortified with 20 layers of reinforced walls. Still, inside the prison, Kingstone is in full stride, his power intensifying as he gears up to teach Huang a lesson he won't forget. With a mighty leap, Kingstone launches himself at Huang, descending like a meteor with a devastating kick that obliterates everything in its path. The prison shakes even harder, the impact echoing through the corridors. Back in the control room, one officer cautiously informs the warden that Kingstone's attack hasn't just unsettled the structure, it's shattered all 20 layers of the supposedly indestructible walls. Hearing this, the warden's face goes pale as she processes the catastrophic damage. Meanwhile, Huang, somewhat impressed, realizes that the old man isn't just talk, and he contemplates following Kingstone through the now broken barriers to freedom. But just as Huang considers his next move, a familiar voice interrupts him. It's the crazed woman, Sinka, who had been obsessing over Gangu. The officers in the command room watch in shock as events take an unexpected turn. Huang, equally bewildered, demands to know who these newcomers are, only for Sinka, the crazed woman who's been obsessing over Gang, to suggest they could get to know each other better if they just talk. It seems like a twisted date inside a high-security prison, much to the warden's frustration. She's baffled by how Sinka managed to reach the 5th basement, a restricted level. Sinka, sensing the eyes on her, casually flicks her fingers, shutting down every surveillance device trained on them, leaving the warden gritting her teeth in annoyance. Meanwhile, we cut back to Gangu, who reports to the warden that he's cleared the 1st basement floor and is now heading down to the 2nd. Just as he's about to proceed, the warden urgently orders him to stop. But before she can explain, the transmission cuts out. Assuming the signal's simply bad down here, Gangu moves forward, determined to press on. Opening the heavy door, he begins his descent to the 2nd basement floor. Unlike the gruesome scenes he encountered above, this floor is eerily clean, too clean. There are no bodies, no bloodstains, nothing but an unsettling silence. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoes through the hall. Gangu turns to see an officer, running for her life from a pack of rabid hounds. When they lock eyes, the woman mistakes Gangu for his brother, Gango. Just as the monstrous hounds are about to attack, Gangu obliterates them, leaving the woman momentarily speechless. As Gangu asks if she's all right, the woman throws her arms around him, tears streaming down her face, still believing him to be Gango. She expresses her surprise at seeing him here, even more so to discover that he has superpowers, something she never saw Gango use. However, Gangu gently corrects her, explaining that he isn't Gango but Gangu, his brother. Realizing her mistake, the woman's face shifts to one of confusion. Recognizing him as a hero from the Hero Association, she questions why he's here, dressed in an officer's uniform. Gangu brushes past the pleasantries, reminding her that this floor is far from safe, urging her to leave immediately. But what she says next takes him by surprise. She addresses him as brother-in-law. She introduces herself as Jayam, his sister-in-law, leaving Gangu momentarily stunned. The scene shifts to the 2nd basement's isolation cell, where 2 shadowy figures hover, surrounded by floating prisoners. One of them, a woman with a dark, priest-like aura, mutters that someone has killed her hounds. This priestess goes by the name of Mal, while her brother, the boy with blue eyes beside her, reassures her that he'll avenge her by sending this intruder straight to hell. Back with Gangu, He's still reeling from the brother-in-law revelation. He takes a moment to process it, finally acknowledging that he knew Gangu had found someone special but hadn't realized they were married. There's an unspoken tension in Jayam's face, and after a pause, she hints at something more, directing his attention to her belly. Gangu's heart skips a beat as she explains that she's expecting Gangu's future niece or nephew. Shocked, Gangu asks more questions, and Jayam explains that it's only been a month, so they don't know the gender yet. Gangu had planned to share the news with him after Huang's execution, hoping for a happier reunion. The weight of this news softens Gangu's expression, though Jayam senses a sadness behind his smile. Concerned, she asks if something is bothering him. Gangu quickly shakes his head, insisting he's fine, but the pain is still visible in his eyes. Curious about his appearance, she asks why he's wearing an officer's uniform when, as a hero, he wouldn't need to follow the dress code. Gangu explains that he's no longer just a hero. He's taken on the role of a special corrections officer, tasked with executing prisoners within Ruculus. Jayam, shocked, asks if the warden is forcing him into this job, but Gangu reassures her, choosing this path himself after recent events. He goes on to fill her in about the EMP strike during Huang's execution. The mention of the EMP leaves Jayam speechless, struggling to comprehend the implications. She asks if there's any idea who was responsible, but Gangu simply replies that they're still investigating, the culprit shrouded in mystery. Jiahong starts to panic, thinking about her husband, who was supposed to be on the 5th basement floor for the execution when the EMP struck. Gangu hesitates, choosing not to reveal the truth. Instead, he reassures her, saying Gangu has been sending rescue signals from the 5th basement floor. Relieved, she breathes a sigh of relief, not realizing the actual situation. Gangu then urges her to leave the area, reminding her it's too dangerous. But Jiahong insists on staying, saying he's going to need her down there. Curious about her confidence, Gangu questions her. She reveals she has a special ability called psychometry, allowing her to read memories just by looking at someone. Gangu, now anxious about the lie he just told, is visibly nervous, but she reassures him, explaining she doesn't access memories without a valid reason. She mostly uses it to determine guilt or innocence in her role as an officer. Still doubtful, Gangu asks how her ability will help in this specific situation. That's when she drops a key detail. The entire 2nd basement floor is under the control of 2 siblings, Meal and Male, who have both summoning abilities and special powers. They can summon creatures that pierce hearts, turning their victims into puppets. Every prisoner on the 2nd floor has been transformed into one of their puppets. Gangu surprises her by saying he already knows their powers, as they trained under Mago, a hero. Politely, he tries to direct her to safety, as he doesn't need further intel. But Jiahong piques his interest when she mentions that some of the puppets are actually officers, and her ability to read memories is the only way to distinguish them from other prisoners. Gangu argues that if anyone's been turned into a puppet, they're as good as dead, making memory reading pointless. But Jiahong insists that once freed from the siblings' control, the officers could return to normal. Gangu challenges her plan, doubting the siblings would willingly release anyone. Undeterred, Jiahong suggests she could persuade them, confident she has a way with words. Despite her determination, Gangu can't ignore the risk, especially with her pregnancy. Jiahong acknowledges the danger but says she can't abandon her duty as an officer, her commitment bringing a slight smile to Gangu's face. Still worried, Gangu decides on extra precautions. He raises his hand, conjuring a red energy barrier to shield Jiahong from harm. She nervously eyes the barrier, asking if it's safe and not about to slice her up. As he escorts her through the corridor within the barrier, they encounter a new threat. Ahead, they see creatures under Meal's control. Before Jiahong can give too much information, Gangu cuts to the chase, asking her to identify the officers among them. She immediately dives into their memories, pinpointing 2 soldiers at the back of the group. Having the intel he needed, Gangu quickly wraps Jiahong in the barrier to block her view, clearly not wanting her to see what he's about to do. With a plan in mind, Gangu extends his dark energy tendrils, isolating the 2 officers and securing them separately from the other prisoners. Then, he sets to work on the monsters, dismantling them with his bare fists, showing no mercy. Each hit is precise and powerful, leaving nothing but shattered remains in his wake. In one final move, he slices through the remaining monsters in an instant. Watching from a distance, Meal and Male grow uneasy. Meal wonders aloud if Gangu might actually be stronger than their mentor, possibly even more powerful than Captain Marvel. Male, visibly scared, clings to her brother, but Meal remains calm, assuring her that even if Gangu is formidable, defeating them won't be easy. They still have a small army of prisoners and officers turned puppets on their side. Once Gangu finishes off the monsters, he releases Jahong from the barrier, letting light and air back in. Dazed and annoyed, she questions him, demanding to know why she was cut off from the action. Gangu apologizes, but when she presses for details, he simply says he isolated the officers and executed the prisoners. His cold demeanor unsettles her, as she realizes he started to justify these acts as executions. Shocked, Jahong asks how he managed to pull this off, especially since the execution devices are on the 5th basement floor. Casually, Gangu replies that he handled it personally. Her shock intensifies, and she demands to know who authorized this. Gangu explains he's acting independently, with the warden's approval. Disappointed and disturbed, Jahong sighs, questioning the warden's judgment in assigning such tasks to Gangu. She's unsettled by his matter-of-fact attitude toward the executions. Gangu, unfazed, explains that he's simply fulfilling his duty as a correction officer, seeing nothing wrong with his actions. Jahong attempts to remind him that officers are supposed to rehabilitate, not destroy, but Gangu dismisses her. He admits he once believed in the ideals of not killing, of letting justice take its course, but he now sees the harsh reality. Clinging to such beliefs only leads to unnecessary deaths at the hands of ruthless criminals. Trying to reason with them, he says, is as pointless as teaching a cow to do backflips. With a hardened resolve, Gangu declares that he no longer cares if he's a hero or an officer. His only goal is to subdue these monsters and restore order. His dark transformation chills Jahong to the core, and she reminds him that those he's killed were still human. Annoyed by her sympathy, Gangu counters, asking what makes her think these monsters are truly human. In his eyes, every criminal on each floor has committed atrocities that they now must answer for. Gangu reminds Jahong of the old debate around abolishing the death penalty to prevent wrongful convictions, but he points out that ever since psychometric users emerged, wrongful convictions have become a thing of the past. She, as a psychometric herself, knows this well. However, Jahong continues to argue that individuals shouldn't be acting as executioners. Frustrated, Gangu shuts her down, bluntly telling her to stop spouting the same nonsense. He warns her that if she keeps it up, he'll send her topside while he handles things his way no matter who gets caught in the crossfire. Startled, Jahong falls silent and follows him further into the prison. When they encounter more creatures, Gangu prompts Jahong to identify the officers among the prisoners. She quickly locates 3 officers at the back. Just as Gangu prepares to take down the creatures, she drops a bombshell, saying Gangu would be devastated to see his brother as a stone-cold killer. This line hits Gangu hard, leaving him momentarily frozen. A creature takes a swing, but its weapon shatters against him, snapping him back. Then, something inside him snaps, unleashing a relentless barrage on the monsters. Fueled by frustration, Gangu tears through the prisoners turned monsters, leaving behind nothing but blood and broken bodies. Once he finishes, he pauses, standing in a downpour of blood. Meanwhile, Sinka, still watching, is getting more and more enthralled, convinced Gangu is her dream husband. After the carnage, he and Jahong continue onward, with her shocked to see the floor wiped clean, save for the 3 officers. Gangu notices something, and when he turns, he spots familiar faces, the 2 siblings, Meal and Male, who control this floor. He's relieved they've finally appeared, saving him the trouble of hunting them down. Jahong, however, clearly has a history with these siblings, but they're not exactly welcoming her back. They mock her, saying they would have sent her packing to heaven for the kindness she once showed them if they'd had the chance. Before Gangu can engage, Jahong tries to reason with them, urging them to release the prisoners under their control. In exchange, Gangu promises them a quick, painless death. Clinging to each other in fear, the siblings ask if there's any way they can avoid being killed. Gangu bluntly states that if they hadn't already claimed thousands of lives, he might have given them a break and simply ordered them to put on suppression devices. But with blood on their hands, mercy isn't on the table. Male, the sister, accuses Gangu of being the worst of them all, a monster who won't see heaven. Gangu, fists clenched, is ready to send them to the underworld. The brother attempts to negotiate, offering to release their control over the prisoners if Gangu lets them go. Unsurprisingly, Gangu shuts him down immediately. Jiahong steps in, advising the siblings to comply and put on their suppression devices. Defensively, Meal argues they haven't done anything wrong, refusing to comply. Jiahong hesitates, seeming to sympathize slightly, but Gangu, unwavering, tells her that trying to reason with them is futile. He insists she leave it to him from here. The brother tries once more, suggesting that if Gangu hears their story, he might change his mind. But Gangu dismisses him, uninterested in hearing any excuses. Before the fight begins, he creates a barrier around Jiahong to block her view, preventing her from witnessing what's about to happen. With the siblings isolated, he ensnares them in his red energy, lifting them off the ground and squeezing them until they start to writhe in pain. Recalling an old lesson on torture from a past villain, Gangu applies the knowledge, ignoring the siblings' taunts as they call him the true monster. With one final surge, he obliterates them, erasing their presence from the floor. When more creatures rush at him, he methodically cuts them down, sending their dismembered heads spinning through the air. Being called a monster clearly irritates Gangu, but he presses on, unfazed by the taunts. In another part of the prison, Sinka watches his face with terror through her crystal ball, her confidence wavering. It appears the siblings have been working together, with one attempting to breach the walls while the other buys time. The sister, desperate to buy more time for her brother, begins chanting, summoning another wave of monstrous creatures. But Gangu doesn't hesitate since they're not human. He's quick to tear through them, blasting every last one without a second thought. No matter how many monsters appear, he demolishes them all with one powerful strike after another. As the sister struggles to keep Gangu occupied, she anxiously asks her brother how much longer he needs. He replies he needs another 10 minutes to breach the wall. With little choice left, she bites her thumb, activating another spell. But just as she finishes, something crashes through the ceiling. Amidst the dust, Gangu steps into view, and upon seeing him, the sister's composure crumbles. Tears streaming down her face, Gangu tells her he came directly to her because battling those creatures was a waste of time. He warns them both that this is their final chance to release the officers under their control in exchange for a quick, painless end. The siblings are stunned that he made it through so effortlessly. Despite their fear, they still refuse his order. Unfazed, Gangu conjures summoning circles, and with a clap of his hands, for divine-looking creatures appear. Each looks formidable in its own right, but before they can even act, Gangu slices through them with a single strike, reducing them to nothing. Realizing they're cornered, the siblings resort to drastic measures, hoisting the captive officers and threatening to kill them if Gangu comes any closer. But their plan backfires when Gangu grabs the sister, threatening her life instead. He puts her through agonizing pain, her screams filling the room as her brother watches, helpless and horrified. Unable to bear it, the brother finally surrenders, agreeing to release the officers. Just as they comply, the brother requests a chance to speak with Jiahong before they meet their fate. But Gangu, true to his word, continues inflicting pain on the sister until the brother fully relents. In the next moment, the officers and prisoners return to their senses, free from the siblings' control. Without hesitation, Gangu starts taking down the prisoners one by one, leaving the siblings in utter terror. As the bodies pile up, it becomes clear that the siblings might not have been acting out of sheer malice but perhaps desperation. Still, with the area cleared of threats, Gangu turns his attention to the officers, instructing them to head upstairs immediately. As they scramble to leave, he turns back to the siblings. Because they honored their side of the deal, he agrees to let them speak with Jiahong, but insists they move to a safer place, out of sight from the pregnant officer. Once out of the gruesome scene, Jiahong joins them, bewildered. Gangu informs her that the officers are safe from the siblings' mind control, and both siblings wish to speak with her before their execution. Jiahong suggests slapping suppression devices on them instead, but Gangu shuts her down, firmly reminding her that he doesn't like repeating himself. He explains again that everyone on the lower basement floors has taken countless lives, and they won't be left unpunished. The siblings, desperate, plead their case to Ja, claiming they don't deserve the death penalty. Ja is given a moment to speak on their behalf but falters, unable to find words in their defense. With no objection from her, Gangu prepares to carry out their sentence. The sisters' pleas grow frantic, her tears unrelenting, but Gangu doesn't waver. He raises his fist and brings it down, unleashing a powerful blow that fills the air with dust. As the dust settles, he finds the siblings protected by a barrier, seemingly cast by Mago, a hero from equality. This unexpected twist leaves Gangu certain that the siblings couldn't have summoned such a strong shield themselves. It had to be Mago. Gangu doesn't hesitate, forming a dark energy sphere in his hand and smashing it against the barrier, only to find yet another shield standing in his way. Gangu feels his patience wearing thin with Mago's relentless barriers. Each one shatters under his fists, but it seems no matter how hard he tries, he can't quite reach the siblings. Just as he's about to break through the final barrier, we're pulled into a flashback. In the past, the heroes are enjoying a rare day off, Mago playing happily with his children amidst laughter and smiles. He gathers everyone around, inviting them to join in, but Gangu sits alone under a tree, lost in thought. Mago notices and walks over, asking if he's not a fan of kids. Gangu admits he doesn't dislike children. He just doesn't know how to connect with them. Mago suggests he try to recall what his own parents did with him as a child. Gangu's face darkens as he reveals that his parents died when he was very young and that his older brother was the only family he knew. Mago immediately apologizes, realizing he hit a sensitive spot. After an awkward pause, he lightens the mood with a half-joke, saying he could act as Gangu's parent if he ever needed someone to talk to. Gangu gives him a skeptical look, and Mago chuckles, assuring him it's partly in jest. He says, however, that Gangu can come to him whenever things get tough. The scene shifts to a darker memory. The day Huang's rampage left devastation in its wake. Gangu's soul broke as he saw his fallen friends scattered around him. In his final moments, Mago tried to reassure him, telling him everything would be all right. The memory fades, and Gangu snaps back to the present, facing the last barrier. For a moment, he hesitates just before breaking through, glancing at the image of Mago above him. He releases Ja from the protective barrier and asks if she can read memories from illusions. She replies hesitantly, saying she can, and he points at the image of Mago, asking her to read the memory of when he cast this spell on the siblings. Moments later, Ja projects Mago's memory in her hand, showing a tender scene where Mago embraces the siblings, holding them close. Gangu watches with a cold expression, dismissing it as an unpleasant memory, while Ja sees it as endearing. Curious why Mago would protect them, Gangu wonders aloud, still resolute that he'll execute them for their crimes, regardless of what hardships shape them into killers. Ja explains that memories like these reflect moments from Mago's past, offering glimpses into what made him connect with the siblings. As she releases the memory, we drift further back into another flashback, a grim scene in an underground auction house. At the heart of this illegal marketplace, rare ability users are displayed in cages like trophies. Among them, the siblings, barely 6 years old, huddle together as the crowd gawks at them. It's an event known as the Ability User Auction, catering to VIPs who treat people with special abilities as collectibles. It turns out Meal and Mail were sold to the auction house by their own father. Summoners, a rare breed in that world, were always in demand, and the siblings hid their powers to avoid being sold. But when the auction house grew impatient, they prepared to dispose of them until an enthusiastic buyer appeared. This mysterious woman showed interest in their unique abilities, particularly their potential to summon both angels and demons. When asked why she wanted them, the woman's twisted smile revealed her sick fascination. She wanted to see what would happen if an angel mated with a demon. Too young to grasp her intentions fully, the siblings looked up at her with innocent confusion. She just smiled back, assuring them they'd understand soon enough. The entire facility trembles as a colossal explosion tears through the ceiling, creating a gaping hole that rains debris and dust. Nearby structures crumble under the shockwave, leaving everyone within the underground auction house sealed off by a familiar green barrier. Above, we spot the legendary Mago and his apprentice Lupus Allen, a summoning-type ability user. It turns out Mago is here to train Lupus in controlling her summoning powers. Amid their sparring, their attention shifts to two young siblings below, who reveal themselves as summoners and plead to join Mago's tutelage. Intrigued, Mago considers taking them on, despite Lupus's reservations. Testing their abilities, Mago asks the siblings to summon something. Without hesitation, they conjure angels and demons, an impressive feat for such young summoners, as most children can only summon simpler objects. Recognizing their potential, Mago extends his mentorship to them, sparking a journey that would shape their lives over the next 3 years. Under Mago's guidance, the siblings learn the true potential of their powers. For summoners, imagination fuels creation, allowing them to bring forth anything they envision. Meal, with memories of a protective mother, naturally summons angels, while her brother, shaped by their father's cruelty, conjures demons. Mago encourages them to expand their imaginations, predicting that their unique perspectives could produce extraordinary results. The siblings dream of a world where good people ascend to heaven and the wicked are sent to hell, a vision inspired by their mother's simple wisdom.